What can you take from the man who needs nothing? That question alone unsettles rulers, institutions, even entire societies. Because the moment a man ceases to be controlled by promises, pleasures, or threats, he becomes untouchable. He no longer plays by the rules written for him. And that makes him dangerous, perhaps the most dangerous figure of all. Carl Jung understood this deeply. To him, the true path of individuation, of becoming a whole and sovereign self, wasn't about acquiring more, but detaching from what enslaves. And yet this simple idea strikes fear into the very foundations of power. Why? Because society thrives on dependency. From the time you are a child, you're trained to need approval from authority, to need validation from peers, to need money, status, and endless external rewards. Modern life conditions us to believe that our worth lies outside of us. But the man who withdraws from this game, who no longer craves constant recognition or approval, exposes the illusion for what it is. And society does not forgive those who reveal its illusions.
So we must ask, why does a man who needs nothing terrify the world around him? The answer is psychological, and Jung's framework reveals it. At its core, people cling to external attachments, relationships, possessions, roles, because they are terrified of facing the inner void. To sit with one's own mind, to confront the shadow, to endure silence and self-awareness, that is something most cannot bear. Society is built on the avoidance of this inner confrontation. But Jung's individuated man does exactly that. He retreats, he withdraws, he resists the pull of superficial distractions. Instead of outsourcing meaning, he digs inward until he uncovers an inner foundation that cannot be taken away. He becomes self-contained, whole, free. And here's the threat. A self-contained man cannot be controlled.
Think of how institutions exert power. Politicians rule by fear and promises. Employers motivate through salaries and promotions. Social media manipulates through likes, followers, and endless comparisons. At every level, the system thrives only because people are dependent on what it offers. But what if a man doesn't need it? What if his happiness doesn't rise and fall with a number in his bank account or a heart-shaped icon on a screen? What if he doesn't need constant companionship to feel whole? That man slips out of the net. He is no longer seduced by rewards or paralyzed by threats. And so, to those who depend on obedience, such a man is dangerous. Carl Jung would argue that individuation, this process of shedding the false layers and integrating the shadow, is society's greatest act of rebellion. It dismantles the invisible chains of dependency. But here's the darker truth. Society doesn't just fear such a man, it despises him. Why? Because he mirrors back everyone else's chains. The dependent man sees him and feels inferior. The insecure man sees him and feels exposed. The manipulative man sees him and feels powerless. In psychology, this triggers projection. People will label the independent man as arrogant, cold, antisocial, or even dangerous, not because he is any of these things, but because his very existence shatters their illusions. It is far easier to demonize the man who needs nothing than to confront the possibility of living without chains. And this is why Jung's teachings remain unsettling to this day. Individuation sounds peaceful, but in truth, it is profoundly disruptive. To awaken to self-sovereignty is to threaten every system built on dependence. So here we are, standing at the edge of a deeper revelation. The man who needs nothing doesn't just find peace. He destabilizes everything around him. But what exactly does Jung mean by individuation? And how does withdrawing from society's illusions create such power? We'll break down Jung's philosophical framework, shadow, persona, and self, and reveal why detachment is not weakness, but the highest form of strength.
Every man begins his journey with the persona, the social mask. It's the version of yourself that the world rewards. Polite, agreeable, productive, obedient. From childhood, you were told who you should be, what's acceptable, what's attractive, what earns approval. And most people never escape this mask. They live their entire lives as actors in someone else's play. They work jobs they hate, maintain appearances they despise, and sacrifice authenticity for the illusion of belonging. But here's the problem. The persona is not you. It is merely a performance. And the man who confuses the mask for his true identity becomes forever dependent on the applause of the crowd. This is why most men remain trapped. They are terrified of what happens if the mask falls. Behind the mask lies something darker, the shadow. These are the instincts, emotions, and truths you repress because society told you they were unacceptable. Anger, ambition, lust, resentment, all buried deep, all denied. But here is the paradox. The more you repress the shadow, the more it controls you unconsciously. The nice guy who suppresses his anger becomes secretly resentful. The obedient worker who hides his ambition becomes bitter and self-destructive. Society trains men to suppress their shadow precisely because a man who integrates it becomes uncontrollable. And this is where Jung's philosophy becomes explosive. Integration doesn't mean acting out every impulse. It means confronting the shadow, owning it, and harnessing its energy consciously. The man who does this no longer fears his own darkness, and if you cannot be blackmailed by your own hidden instincts, you become immune to manipulation. When the mask and the shadow are reconciled, a man begins to glimpse the self, Jung's vision of psychological wholeness. The self is not dependent on external validation, nor terrified of internal chaos. It is balanced, centered, sovereign. And this is precisely what makes him dangerous. Because unlike the fragmented man, who seeks approval, avoids confrontation, and betrays himself for comfort, the individuated man cannot be bought, seduced, or coerced. He is free. And freedom in its purest form always threatens power structures. This is why Jung so often spoke of withdrawal, not as weakness, but as a crucible. When a man pulls back from society's noise, when he embraces silence, solitude, and reflection, he strips away the false layers. Without the constant validation of the crowd, he is forced to confront the raw truth of who he is. Most men cannot endure this. They rush back to distractions, to social media, to empty relationships, anything to avoid the silence. But the man who stays, the one who withstands the solitude, emerges stronger than ever. His neediness evaporates, his clarity sharpens, his soul becomes unshakable. And this is precisely what terrifies the world. Because once a man learns he doesn't need the system loses its grip on him. So, Jung's framework reveals why the man who needs nothing is so rare and so powerful. He sheds the mask, integrates the shadow, and discovers the self. And in doing so, he walks away from society's illusions, untouchable. But this raises the final, urgent question. What happens when such a man walks back into society? How does the world react when confronted with a human being it cannot manipulate?
We've followed Jung's path step by step. The man strips away his mask, integrates his shadow, and discovers the self. He emerges from solitude no longer needy, no longer dependent. But now comes the most dangerous part, when he returns to society. Because such a man doesn't simply disappear into the mountains. He walks among us, and his very presence destabilizes the systems that thrive on obedience.
History shows it clearly. Society has always feared individuals who stand apart. Socrates was executed for corrupting the youth, not because he committed crimes, but because he taught men to question. Jesus was crucified not for violence, but for teaching people they could find the kingdom within, beyond priests and rulers. Even Nietzsche himself, in his writings, foresaw how societies react when individuals dare to break free from the herd. They ridicule, then demonize, then destroy. Why? Because the man who needs nothing cannot be manipulated by reward or punishment. He does not crave applause. He cannot be bribed with status. He does not tremble at the threat of exile. And so he exposes the game for what it is, a collective illusion. This is why people resent him. His freedom feels like an accusation against their chains. Here we see Jung's insights align with Nietzsche's. Most people, trapped in dependency, are bound by resentment, a deep, simmering resentment toward those who embody freedom and strength. They cannot become sovereign themselves, so they lash out against those who do. The herd survives by keeping each member tied to the same illusions. If one man steps outside, he threatens the unity of the group. His example says, "You could be free too, but you choose not to be." And nothing infuriates the dependent mind more than realizing its chains are voluntary. This is why society punishes nonconformity more than crime. To steal is forgivable. To question the system is not.
The man who needs nothing functions like a mirror. Around him, others see their own dependency laid bare. The ambitious man sees his hunger for validation. The insecure man sees his fear of solitude. The manipulator sees his power vanish. And so, people project their discomfort onto him. They call him arrogant, cold, dangerous, or even insane. But these labels are masks, ways of protecting themselves from the deeper truth he reveals, that they are still enslaved. This is why Jung's individuated man is society's greatest threat. He forces everyone else to confront their false lives.
Yet here lies the paradox. While society may hate him, it also secretly longs for him, because every age needs such men. They are the ones who break illusions, who carry new truths, who show that another way of being is possible. They are the ones who remind us that freedom begins not in revolutions or politics, but in the mind. That the greatest act of rebellion is not overthrowing rulers, but refusing to be ruled from within. One such man can inspire thousands. His silence is more powerful than a king's decree, his detachment more frightening than an army, because he cannot be moved by the levers of control.
So let us return to the opening question. What can you take from the man who needs nothing? The answer is nothing, and that is why he is feared. Jung's psychology makes it clear. When a man no longer depends on society for meaning, he becomes sovereign. And sovereignty is contagious. It awakens others, disrupts illusions, and tears apart the fragile fabric of control. That is why history silences such men. That is why society resents them. And that is why, even today, the man who needs nothing remains the most dangerous figure of all.